and welcome to another 3-string cigar box guitar lesson. I'm Sean from Coda Guitar and we're looking at playing some chords today. So we've got 3 strings, obviously. It's not quite as versatile as a normal 6-string or even a 4-string cigar box guitar, but we can still get quite a nice sort of varied sound out of it depending on which chords we put together. So that was all very sort of sweet sounding. It was in a major key. So what happens with chords is you often put them together in very specific sequences, and you'll get either a sort of major sound or maybe a bluesy sound or maybe a minor sound. So in this video we're going to be looking at major progressions. Do another one for minor. So you can check that out on our channel as well. But before we carry on, let's just make sure we're in tune. So this is what you class as standard cigar box guitar tuning, which is low G, middle D, and high G. So I'm going to switch these effects off. So that was like a little bit of chorus and delay. So got a slightly sort of flatter sound now. So G, D, G is actually a power chord. It's a type of chords which is basically like a neutral chord. So it's neither major nor minor. I won't go into too much theory, but there are basically 3 notes in either a major or a minor chord, and with a power chord we've removed the note that makes either the major or the minor sound major or minor. Like this, for example. Here is a open G major chord. So if I just push down fret 4 on this top string, then that gives us a major. So it sounds quite sort of happy and positive. If I knock it down a fret, that's going to give us a G minor. So that's now fret 3. Okay. So what we'll do is we'll just leave that for a minute, and you can hear it sounds a bit more sort of neutral when I go back to the open strings. But we're going to put together a very specific sequence, which is just going to go up the neck to start with, and it will sound a bit like this. We're going to go G, A, B, so that was fret 2, fret 4 for A and B, fret 5 for C, fret 7 for D, and fret 9 for E. Okay. Now currently they're neither major nor minor, they're just all power chords, because what I'm doing here is I'm barring with my first finger. Now depending on like the height of the strings, or what you call the action, the height of the strings off the frets, you might find barring a little bit tricky to start with. It's something that frequently kind of stumps guitarists, any number of strings to start with. So I'll just cover that in a little bit of detail here, just so you can figure out what you're doing. So basically my thumb is halfway down the back of the neck, okay, and it wants to be directly behind. So let's go for an easy one. We'll go up to fret 5 to start with. So my thumb is going to be directly behind where my first finger needs to be, which is on fret 5, or just behind fret 5. Okay, so I'm essentially just trying to pinch like that, sort of clamp onto the strings. So my thumb is applying the pressure just in between these 2 joins in my finger. Okay, and it sort of helps keep your finger nice and straight when you do a bar. And I'm also rolling off a little bit onto the side. Okay, so just slightly onto the side. So what you call calluses, like thicker layers of skin on the ends of your fingers. You've probably developed those a little bit, depending on how long you've been playing for, but I've actually got a callus on the side of my fingers specifically from barring. Okay, so it probably feel a little bit painful to start with because you're kind of on the bony bit of your finger, but that's where you can be like fairly efficient. You don't need to feel like you're throttling the neck. You can apply a decent amount of pressure without like putting loads and loads of effort in, which is what we want. We don't want to run out of stamina too quickly. I'm also, if you can see there, very close to the the closer I am to the fret without actually muffling it, without actually getting on top of the fret, the less pressure I need to apply. So you might want to just make sure that you can do that before carrying on, because that's actually quite a difficult thing. Also, quite a lot of my nail is poking up over the top of this bottom string here. Don't be too flat. Obviously don't be too high either. Just find something that works for your particular sort of finger length and hand size. But you should always feel like you're pinching onto that middle portion. Okay, so once you can do that, we're going to go from fret 2. So that one feels like the strings are quite tight down there. So that's an A up to B, which is fret 4. Up to C, which is fret 5, and the further up the neck you go, the sort of looser the strings feel, but actually sometimes they can get higher up. The action can increase the closer we get up to this part of the neck. D is fret 7, and E is fret 9. Okay, so what we can do, you can first of all you can just try and put those together in any order you want. You know, it literally any order will sound fine. Some will sound better than others, but you know, you can just mess around there. C, E, D, G, works quite nicely. Or just ascending up, A, B, C, G. So there's a whole bunch of different songs that will probably start jumping out at you depending on what chord progression you come up with. But what we'll do is we'll add the extra note in, which is going to be creating now minor or major chords. Okay, so fret 2 is the A. Now this wants to be a minor, this one. So I'm still barring, but with a little finger it's going to be 3 frets higher on fret 5 on the top string, the high G. Okay, so I'm keeping my thumb and my first finger in the same position, bit of a stretch up, and so again, depending on what the action on your guitar is like, it might feel a bit tricky. Quite often the nut on a cigar box is an actual screw or machine screw or something like that, so you can always try and like replace it for a smaller one if you want to lower the action, if you want to get into chord playing but maybe it's set up for slide at the minute. So that is an A minor, and that's a B minor, so fret 4, exactly the same shape, just moving up to fret 4, and then so I'm now on fret 7. The C, however, wants to be a major, so I'm barring on fret 5, but the major needs to be 4 frets higher up than the bar, so that's fret 9 this time. So a bit of stretch again. And then the D wants to also be a major, so that's a bar on fret 7, and it's the little finger on fret 11. And then finally the last chord that we're going to play, E minor, is right up on fret 9, and it's a minor, so it's only 3 frets higher, and the little finger is on fret 12. Okay. So again, you can put those in any order, get a really nice sound. Going back to the open G there, just a G major that is, so that's fret 4 there. So they're all quite physical. What we can try and do is, even though it's a little bit limited with the tuning and the number of strings, we can play some what we call open chords, where we're not fretting every single string. So for example, I could play a C like that. So instead of like that, I can play a C like this. Okay, so that is exactly the same notes, but it's just that they're sort of stacked in a different order. So this one sounds a bit higher, this one sounds a bit lower. Okay, now this is physically a bit easier to play, but or like stamina wise, you don't have to push down as hard. But what can be difficult is we need to bridge round. So you need to curl your fingers round so you're not catching the string underneath. So in particular with this chord, my little finger, if it's too flat, it's going to catch this middle string here. So I need to just bridge around. I'm keeping my thumb in this same position as before. If you can see the width of this neck, because it doesn't have what we call a metal truss rod through it. So it's been made with a very thick bit of wood to stop it warping. So depending on what your cigar box guitar's like, you might find it's a bit too chunky to be sort of holding your thumb up here, unless you've got like a really big handspan. But I'm going for thumb back down here like a bar position, and I'm trying to bridge round with all of my fingers, so that, or my two fingers, fingers 1 and 4, so that I don't catch strings underneath. So just to recap, that's fret 2 and that's fret 5. So that gives us a C chord. Right. Now if I just drop the note down on this string, just using finger 3 on fret 4 instead of little finger on fret 5, that is definitely a different chord. That's actually an E minor. So there's a C, there's an E minor. Whereas before, there's a C, there's an E minor. So it's a much more sort of subtle change there, and a bit easier to play. So it's not a bad thing to do there. We can also, instead of playing the D right up here, we can play a D like this. So this is actually a power chord as well. It only has 3 notes in it, 2 notes, sorry, instead of 3. But it's absolutely fine. You know, so if we're down this part of the neck, you know, so I can still get like a chord progression going on there. So I can also, if I'm thinking about the distance between the barred chords, so I've got A on fret 5, sorry, C on fret 5, and D on fret 7, that's 2 frets apart. So if I've got this C shape that we just learnt a minute ago, why don't I try and move that up 2 frets? That's quite nice. So this open G on the top is actually adding an extra note in that isn't, technically speaking, part of a D chord, but it sounds nice, so great, I'll use it. Instead of, you get quite a different sound depending on which particular shape or which shapes you put together, even though it's going to be the same chords. Or so that was basically the same D to C to G each time, but depending on which shape you use, you get quite a different sound. Okay, so how we put some of those chords together in a similar way to what I did in the intro is we can sort of change picking patterns a little bit, just to mix it all up, vary it a bit. So we can do one picking pattern, which is just a straight alternating. I'll demo all these just on the open G. We'll keep it sort of simple for the left hand or fretting hand. So I'm going to play thumb, index on the middle string, thumb, middle on the top string. So it's thumb, index, thumb, middle. So hopefully not too tricky a pattern, that one. And there's another one where we can play just the thumb bass and then a pull where I'm going to use my 2 fingers together, and if I all the time when I'm plucking, I'm sort of plucking into my palm a little bit. Now I remember there's loads of lessons that we've already done, one specifically on like finger picking, fingerstyle, and so check those out. There's also a fretted, no slide involved blues song, which is going to use some similar patterns to this, so you can have a look at that on our channel. So the second pattern is thumb, pull, so that's all strings played at once, thumb, index, middle, and then thumb, index, thumb, middle. So thumb, pull, thumb, index, thumb, middle, thumb, pull, thumb, index, thumb, middle, thumb, pull, thumb, index, thumb, middle. So if we play some chords or different chords along with those, say I'll go for the A minor, and I'm going to do that that last pattern that we just played. So it's thumb, pull, thumb, index, thumb, middle, thumb, pull on B minor, thumb, index, thumb, middle. Do that again. Thumb, pull, thumb, index, thumb, middle, thumb, pull B minor, thumb, index, thumb, middle. If that's a bit of a stretch, just do the straight bar. Now I'm going to go for that sort of jangly D and C down to G. I'm going to change the pattern. I'm going to use the first pattern that we looked at, which was alternating thumb, index, thumb, middle, change, thumb, index, thumb, middle, and back to the second pattern. Thumb, index, thumb, middle, thumb, index, thumb, middle. Do that again. Thumb, index, thumb, middle, thumb, index, thumb, middle. Second pattern. Try going to the, sorry, it's thumb, pull on beat 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Now, I'm not necessarily going to put every single pick in, every single finger pick, because if I've got a slightly tricky change, say if I'm going from here to here, I don't necessarily want to play right up to the end of the bar. So just a slight gap just allows me to change chord, and also I've got to think about changing the picking pattern as well, so I want to keep it quite simple. I'll change to A minor, then thumb, index, thumb, middle, thumb, index, thumb, middle, and then I might go to E minor, and then the same little picking, alternate picking pattern. And all I was doing to kind of embellish that, to make it sound, you know, a bit more varied, a bit more interesting, was looking at which notes work alongside those chords. So we're in a we'll do another lesson on sort of like major scales and minor scales and things, but we're basically in a major key. So you've got notes in a scale that work alongside these chords. It just happens to be that you can play open, 2, 4, 5, open, 2, 4, 5 on all the strings, and all of those work alongside those chords in any order. So I was just doing a little hammer-on thing. Where I was just trying to combine it with sort of keeping the thumb regular on the low string. I can play it on different notes. So that was a little bit more kind of varied, maybe a little bit too complex at the minute, but once again, there's another lesson on fretting, sort of definitely a sort of introductory lesson, but we're looking at hammering on and pulling off, so there's some good exercises to get used to that, just to get your fretting hand working. But if you're able to combine that rhythmically, keeping that regular thumb going, you can sort of mix it up quite a lot. Change chord. So that's it basically. I hope you found that useful, found that interesting. Like I said, barring can be quite difficult, but do your best with that. And if you want to try and put these chords together in different combinations, that's just how people write songs. You know, they'll find chords that fit together well, and then just put them together in different sequences for, you know, maybe a verse or a chorus in one song. There's a sort of sister lesson to this, which is looking at minor progressions, which has got quite a different sound to it. So you can hear that's got quite a different sort of character to it. So if you check that out on the channel, you can start to combine all of this with the different sort of finger style patterns we've been looking at in the blues, and you know, maybe even try and play some of the chords with a bar, a slide on whichever finger you use, and you know, see if you can sort of work around that with the shapes. But the main thing is have fun with it, and we look forward to seeing you here again soon on Coda Guitar.